Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar, What's Next for Digital Marketing, the Impact of COVID-19. I hope you're all keeping well. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Tina Judic and I'm the CEO of Found. The world's changed so much in a matter of weeks in ways no one could or would have thought possible. Yet here we are, protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and working out what the next steps are for our businesses. There's been a wide range of business responses that we've been engaged with here at Found, those whose shops are currently closed and they've got an ever greater reliance on digital, those who have experienced offline activity dropping off and their only source of leads being online. And we're also working with businesses who are pivoting their activity and others who are also pushing on and investing. So whatever your situation, we're here to help. As a digital growth agency, we'll work in partnership to achieve your goals, providing you with input, ideas, action, and impact. And we'll go above and beyond to help you. This situation is new to us all. Everyone is on a different path. However, having the support to navigate along the path is essential. So, to the agenda today. We've got about an hour of content to share with you. Kicking things off is our guest and search guru, John DeVeo from Google. He's going to be sharing some thoughts on helping CMOs in today's uncertain market. Following John is Found's own data scientist, James Woolman, who's been deep diving into what data is telling us during these current times. He's going to speak to you about how you can use data science to lift the filter on search demand. We're going to pose some questions to John and James after the presentations. So if you've got any questions you want to ask, please do type them into the chat box and we'll do our best to ask them. If we don't get to your question, we'll follow up with a blog post and we'll be sure to respond to them there. And finally, for those of you who fancy sticking around, we're holding a mini quiz with our very own head of SEO operations, Tom Brand, as quizmaster. So without further ado, let's kick off the webinar. Over to you, John.
I want to go through a little bit about how Google is actually changing their strategy and actually stepping up into the role that we're expected to do. So first and foremost is helping people find useful, authoritative information. Obviously, day to day, people come to Google all the time for all sorts of questions, and they turn to us as a trusted source of advice. In times like this, it's even more important. So we've taken a lot of action to make sure that the only information that people can find on Google is trusted information, is information that we know that is actually accurate and that they want to find. Secondly is enabling productivity for remote workers and students. So at the moment, everybody is adapting to a new normal, working from home, trying to figure things out that they never knew, as Tina said, that they never thought they'd have to figure out within the next 10 years. So the fact that we offer these products has been a massive challenge to us, but it's something that we're trying to meet. Supporting the global community is another really, really important one. With such a global footprint and so much data and money aiding the help efforts and making sure that governments and people get the right information is one of our most important roles. And then finally, and what we really want to talk about today is helping our customers. So in this case, it's advertisers, and making sure that advertisers are able to make the most of Google at this time and actually meet customers where they want to go. You go to the next slide. So being Google, there is a framework. So how we've noticed people changing and how we've noticed that people actually use Google and use the internet to meet what they need. So we've put it into the ADAPT framework. So I'm going to touch on each of these now, on what it actually means and what we mean by each of the segments. So first of all, it's assembling critical information and video content that they need to survive and that they need to find information. Discovering new connections and nurturing their relationships. So again, people have a lot more time to be online, so they are spending a lot of time developing themselves and developing their interests and trying to meet people, if not physically, then socially and virtually. Adjusting to changes in their routine. So obviously, we've noticed a lot of behavior that normally happens at a certain time of day, or they search for certain things at this time of year, and now that's just completely upended, completely changed on its head, and marketing strategies are going to have to adapt with it. Praising everyday heroes, again, critically important, especially if people are feeling extremely appreciative of the people that are looking after them at the moment. Praising everyday heroes is something that brands are going to have to do. And then finally, taking care of themselves and others. So actually putting that time into self-development and putting that time to actually focus on themselves. So firstly, assemble. You can go to the next slide there. So here we are. So people really, in a time like this, is completely unprecedented. It's a time that nobody saw coming. Nobody really understood what was going to come next. It's a new virus. No one had all of the information. No one knows how to treat it. No one knows how to work from home. So the first thing that people have done, and the thing that people are still doing, is assembling all of the information that they need. So, for example, Clorox, search interest up 25%. People really want to make sure that they're safe, make sure that they're actually able to live in this time like this. Small business loans, I imagine that a lot of people on this call may have searched for exactly this, small business loan. So before the government schemes to back small business and the furlough scheme, there was a lot of interest, and there still is interest in how people are actually going to be able to get through this. So a lot of this is, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's that very base pillar of survival, and making sure that they are able to get through this. What's particularly interesting is that on this deck is, I chose to pick out Zoom, which we can't use, but a lot of people, again, adapting to their existing life, making sure that Zoom is something that they really need. And finally there, the grocery search interest. So looking for in-stock, pickup, cancellations, like this is the information that people really need when they're looking to buy anything. In this case, it's groceries, but not just that. It's what are the questions that people are actually asking, and when they're trying to buy things online, what information do they actually need? And marketers need to think of that. So discovery, you go to the next slide. So yeah, as people being distant, as social animals, people still need to connect. So this is where the internet is really playing into its own. So it's kind of an obvious one, really. Like everyone would have seen this coming from the very start of this, of if people are having to stay indoors, they're going to have to entertain themselves, and they're going to want to speak to a lot of other people. It kind of fits into the Zoom trend that we saw there before. But one of the most interesting things that we've seen on YouTube is people searching for with me. So it's a trend that would have been up years ago, actually, when the internet really started kicking off and YouTube was becoming a bigger platform. People were looking for those online communities of clean with me or shop with me or anything like that. That trend is completely reversed again, and that sort of query is going through the roof. So what we've read into that is people know that other people are going through the same situation. People know that other people are, lonely and trying to adapt to this new normal. So they're trying to find people with similar interests, similar hobbies, and connect with them and find a new way, even if they can't physically be together, that they can socially, I suppose. You go next slide. So adjusting to new routines. So this is a really, really interesting one, and particularly important for businesses. So an interesting one to look at is the podcast search demand. So before all this happened, the normal time, as you'd expect, for people searching for podcasts, searching for things to listen to read online, was during the commuting times. So 7 to 9 a.m. and then 5 to 7 p.m. So obviously they're sitting on the train or they're in their car and they're wanting something to do to pass the time. All of that has completely gone away now. So people are going on the internet at all hours. Maybe if they're not getting enough exercise, they're not sleeping that well. So the fact that podcast search interest has gone from commuting times to 3 a.m., 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. kind of tells us that people are looking for things to do at all hours of the day. Prime now as well. If they can't get out to the shops, they can't get those essentials that they need, or there's something that they want, they are looking for for companies that can deliver next day. They're looking for companies that can fulfill their needs immediately. And that's the information that they need, because it's adjusting to their current predicament. It's really, really interesting that people have had to shift the way that they work so much, so quickly. There you go, next. So praising everyday heroes is a pretty critical one, and I think more to do with the messaging that you have with the brand. So we go to the next slide. So this is particularly pertinent in the UK. So obviously every Thursday is going out that people are going out bashing pots and pans and clapping for the NHS and really appreciating, or at least a newfound appreciation for the things that maybe they took for granted and the people that we may have taken for granted in the past. So what they're really looking to the internet for is how can they contribute? How can they show their appreciation in any small way? So one of the most heartwarming things that I've seen, so not just at Google, but it's the fact that, what was it, when they opened up for the volunteers on the NHS, they needed 250,000 in the first instance to fill the volunteer roles, and they got over 1 million in a day, I mean, a couple of weeks ago now. But that just goes to show the amount that people want to help and the amount that people are expecting companies to help. So it does go noticed when companies don't actively show this and aren't shown to be doing their part or having the right legacy. And I think something to live by in this is, how do you want to be remembered after all this is over? How do you want people to perceive you? And if people perceive you as that brand that genuinely cared, that genuinely helped, and that genuinely, made a difference during this time to their lives in whatever way, then that's going to be that's a lasting impression that we can really make on people. Next one. And finally, taking care. So everybody adapting to a completely new routine, a completely new way of living, and a completely new way of actually having to entertain themselves. So bored is a pretty obvious one, but everybody is sitting at home, where normally you'd maybe go out for a restaurant or go out to a theme park or go and do something with your children or your friends. Right now, nobody's able to do any of that. And it's almost like being taken back in time in terms of what you can do and how you're going to have to entertain yourself. So people are looking for distraction. People are looking for a way to actually get away from the day-to-day life of moving between your bedroom and your living room like I am, or whatever it is that you're currently doing. It's a way to use the internet to engage yourself. You go to the next slide there. And this is particularly seen in health and wellness. So whereas even getting out and about to work every day counts as, every step counts at a time like this, people just aren't getting that anymore. So people are figuring out new ways to be able to go to the gym without going to the gym, and put in a lot of time for self-development. So, they are looking to companies and looking to brands to be able to help them cope with their completely changed routine. It's something that they've never had to do before. So go to the next slide there. So this is interesting to know, all of this, the ADAPT framework, and I'll send on the slides to Found, and they're free to share everything else with you. But that ADAPT framework, it's always good to know how people are using the internet, but exactly how should this impact your marketing strategy? What should you do off the back of this and with this information to make sure that you're able to really meet the moment? So assemble. So you have to be helpful to the assemble phase. So when people are looking for that information, make sure that you're giving them what they need to know front and center, so that they're not wasting time searching for information and potentially coming across bad information about your business or miscorrect information. In discovery, forging new communities and making sure that if you've got an active user base and people that really are passionate about your brand, making sure that they can meet each other or online, making sure that there's a forum that they can all get together with either a similar interest or over your brand to really connect people and help people engage. So adjusting for a 24/7 cycle with people's changing behavior and adjusting all of their normal patterns, you're going to have to change as a business. You can't rely on those normal peak times and getting those deliveries out at the normal time, because everything has completely changed. So I'll go into that a little bit later. Going big on promoting heroes for praise. So again, this can be difficult based on the business that you're in. So some lend itself very, very well for this more than others. But thinking of a way that you can really show your appreciation, show the appreciation to the NHS, to people that are putting their lives on the line at this time, everyday people as well, and appreciating the efforts that people are putting in by staying at home and by sacrificing their time at the moment, and then taking care and making sure that you're helping people occupy themselves. Essentially, even if you're not a brand that would classically be a boredom buster maybe that people turn to. How can you make sure that you're having a bit of fun with it as well and keeping things a little bit light? You're going to go to the next slide. So as I said, in assembly. So how can we actually be helpful as needs evolve? So if people are coming to your website, how can you, what sort of things do they actually want to know? So they want to know if you're still delivering. They want to know they can get it next day delivery. They want to know what the returns policy is. People aren't going to be able to get out and about easily to come and return as they normally would if you've got a shop front, or they're not going to be able to necessarily get in touch with you at every time. So putting that information front and center. If you do sell something, or if you do have a service that is relevant at this time, like we saw Clorox going up, then making sure that that helpfulness and that information that maybe they're after is front and center in everything. So a really good example of this is obviously a US example, but CVS. So they wanted to make sure that they gave people the right information about prescriptions. So obviously a pharmacy over in the States, making sure that they gave people that information. They were waiving the 30-day prescription maintenance fee and the limits, so that people could run over that without having to go to the doctor, putting extra pressure on their health service, and without putting them under undue stress. So how can you make your customers' lives a little bit easier as soon as they find you, so that they're not getting stressed out being on the site and trying to figure something out? The next slide, yeah. So forging new communities. So a really nice platform for this would be YouTube. So whether it's paid advertising on YouTube or having a dedicated YouTube channel, helping people connect with each other and showing them information. People have a lot more time on their hands. So if your product is something that, you know, they can really engage with and really lose themselves in, or there is a community to be had there, now is the time to build it. So engaging people, putting out content that people want to watch, that people want to spend time watching. And that just puts that whole appreciation for you as a brand up. So here, again, another US example for the Center for Disease Control. A YouTube channel has videos of people coming together in Italy, so singing from balconies and fitness instructors. So it's all just a way to be a little bit more heartwarming with the content. Make sure that people know that you're a brand that really does care and that you know, help them. This is a particularly important one, adjusting for a 24/7 time cycle. So in normal times and then previous to this, if someone had a question on the site, they'd maybe come on and they'd speak to a chatbot or an agent, and you'd be able to solve their question there and then. If someone's working or somebody's trying to buy something or get in touch with you at 2 a.m., what do? The first thing to do is make sure that, you know, you've got all of that information front and center. So getting FAQs up and visible on the site, so that if there is genuinely a frequently asked question that you find gets to the site, this is now more than ever it's important to make sure that it's actually available to clients. At the same time, if there's that sort of, if they're looking for entertainment or if they're looking to do a little bit more digging, comes into the previous point as well. Maybe a YouTube video or something that is informative, or how-to guides, or helping people buy online. That 24/7 time cycle means that all of the information that you have and that you would normally have to proactively provide or reactively provide has to be there straight away. Going big on promoting Hero. So there's a little bit of, this is one to think about as in your business, and how can you actually incorporate this into your strategy and make sure that you really are seen to be that brand that cares and is helping people through. I think the nicest example that I can think of is grocery stores, supermarkets, giving special opening times for NHS staff and carers, so that and elderly people, so that they can get in and out unencumbered and make sure that they're seen to, or offering discounts to people that work for the NHS. I know that there was in Ireland, we had Free Now, which was My Taxi, which was Halo, or whatever it is nowadays. But they were giving 25% off taxi rides to people that work for the health service here in Ireland. So that sort of thing really makes sure that, you know, you're playing your part, that you're helping in whatever small way that you can, and that people can see the legacy that you've had. And this is going to be really important in a messaging piece of what is it that people expect from the brands that they engage with? Do they want to buy from a brand that doesn't care about this or doesn't help? And what can you actually do to make sure that they understand how much you really do care? Next one. Yeah, and finally, embracing novelty to combat boredom and anxiety. So again, some interesting ways that your brand, maybe those brand partnerships or those videos that you were going to do all these years, maybe they can actually finally get done. Maybe there is a way that you can help people engage with your brand and maybe just kill a little bit of time with you. If people are looking for, I don't know, switching their energy at the moment, then make it fun. Make it something that they can really engage with. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be a massive technology solution like a lot of brands go for, but just something that you can, you know, it maybe makes it really enjoyable. People are spending a lot more time looking after themselves. They've got a lot more time to research and a lot more time to read up about things. So putting that time into making the journey to get to the final conversion point is actually a really, really important thing to think about right now. You go to the next slide. So I won't talk through every single example on the next slide. They'll all be in the slides that I send across and that you'll be able to get. But here's just a few ways that people are really making sure that they're getting the tone right, that they are, you know, giving discounts or giving people relief on at this time, so they're not adding to the stress of day-to-day life. Making sure that they are playing their part, like LVMH with the producing hand sanitizers, or thousands and thousands of businesses that have decided to manufacture personal protective equipment for the NHS. All of those examples all really do play a role in your marketing at the moment. Anything that you can afford to give or can do to make your customers' lives easier or happier or more enjoyable at this time is really going to be appreciated and remembered in the long run by all customers. If you go to the next slide. So this is what we have done as a business. So again, acted globally, making sure that we are going through all of our marketing channels, making sure that everything hits the right tone. Oh, is someone off mute? Yeah, okay. Making sure that everything's got the right tone, making sure that everything is really as helpful as it possibly can be, making sure that the information that people are after is really front and center, and just being there for people as people expect Google to be. So now is the time to really just put the effort into helping your customers as much as you can, and the benefits will be massive in the short term and the long term. I think that should be the end. You go to the next slide. Thanks very much.
Awesome, that was so good. Thank you, John. Right, so we've got group chat if anyone wants to type in any questions that they have specifically for John, and if not, I personally have loads that I want to ask, so we can selfishly go through mine instead. Cool. So the first question I wanted to ask you, John, is just what platforms you're finding are proving to be like most impactful. Obviously we went through a lot, but customers are kind of completely changing their behavior. So what's the one platform you'd recommend for us all?
Yeah, so I think the thing about these, oh, I can really hear an echo there.
Oh, really?
There we are. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. You sound great to me at the moment, if that helps. Can everyone else hear okay? People on video, thumbs ups, please. Cool, thanks.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think the platforms that people and brands should be really engaging with are the ones that customers can spend the most time on. So I think the one that really jumps to mind is video. So YouTube here. People have so much more time to research things. People have so much more time, and they want to make sure that they're getting the absolute best or the absolute right thing. So if you can provide a lot of that information and a lot of that engagement in a video and actually get people to engage with you over video, I think that's probably where we're seeing a lot of brands see a lot of success. So again, people have so much more time to invest on themselves and invest in researching. So, and anything that kind of gives them that opportunity to kill a couple of hours doing that research that they enjoy, it's obviously something that they want to buy or they need to buy. So making life easier without having to read too much. People do a lot of reading the news, so videos is probably the way to go.
Awesome, thanks. And then the next question that we had from our team who looked through the deck earlier was just, when you were talking about being present on kind of the 24/7 cycle, what's the best way you'd recommend for businesses to do that now? Like, do you think we should do chatbots, or we should be hiring kind of out of hours teams?
Yeah, I mean, a chatbot, that's relevant at any time really, right? So it's trends that we've seen for a long time of people being online more, people expecting the information there and then. So chatbots have always been, or in recent years, have been a great way of kind of flexing to that. I think the most important and simple thing that you can do now, which doesn't require a lot of investment, really is making sure that the information is front and center. So if that's an FAQs, as I went through at the start, like that sort of simple change to the website of what do people really want to know? They want to know if we can deliver right now. They want to know if it's in stock. They want to know if I can return it in 180 days, or get that feedback from clients and put that right at the heart of the marketing plan. Because people, as much as they do want to research the interesting things and when they want to get the best one, they also want the practical knowledge straight there. So if there is anything that normally comes through on the chat or normally gets emailed through as a query, just kind of preempting that. At the same time, if you've got anything about your product or your service which is a little bit technical or something that, again, you get a lot of questions on, making videos, simple videos, so that people know how to either troubleshoot or get that problem solved or understand things. I think one of the really great examples that I heard from Found was, if your audience is typically older and would typically either come in store or engage with you in a kind of a physical manner, like over the phone, they're not going to be able to do that anymore. So buying online, whereas for a lot of people it's second nature, for particularly an older audience, just isn't going to be. So helping them out, showing them those videos and helping them actually buy online, something as simple as that, could really make a massive impact to the way that, to both your business and their lives.
Awesome. We've just had a question also come through on chat. I don't know if you can see it, so I'll read it to you. But one of the attendees noticed that Google ads for words like COVID-19 and coronavirus are prohibited. Do you think that's going to be relaxed once known solutions are made clear, or do you think it will be off for good? Are you allowed to answer that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think in the first slide that I had in this deck there, the most important thing that we can do for everyone right now, and people coming to Google, is make sure that the information that they find in the places that we send people is absolutely reliable, absolutely true, and will not put them in any danger. So completely in line with government advice and completely in line with trusted sellers. So I can't see it being generally relaxed to people, and we're not planning on saying, right, anyone can bid on a coronavirus term, but there are processes that we can have of, if people do have, legitimate reasons to be bidding on those terms, and which some people do, like governments do and health organizations do, then we can relax the rules a little bit. But essentially, we can't be having a lot of people making a lot of money on this, and we definitely don't want to be making money off coronavirus and off of COVID-19 terms, at least.
Of course, makes perfect sense. Cool. So we have one more question, which actually conveniently ties into kind of how I wanted to wrap up Q&A with you. We'd love to hear your kind of top tip that you'd give marketeers now in kind of this, as we enter into hopefully a post COVID-19 world. It would be great to hear the top tip by B2C, but also by B2B, because I know we've got quite a few B2B businesses on as well, please. Thanks.
Okay. So for me, I think it's the same one really, and based on what we're seeing and based on what Google kind of sees coming down the line, is that, like, while nobody knows what life is going to be like after coronavirus and after everything, you know, after the lockdown is lifted, what there's a bit of a consensus around is it won't go back to normal. It won't go back to the way that it was. And in that, people won't be searching like the way that it was. So I think the top tip would be, don't plan for your business to be, right, if it's in-store sales, don't plan for the stores to be open at normal times and to get as much foot traffic. People aren't going to be changing the way they are. If people are still working from home, then we can still expect to be adapting for that 24/7 cycle, even after all this is done. So I think the most important thing that businesses can do now from a marketing perspective is take all of this advice, meet the moment, and make sure that when you come out of this, people, you know who you are, know what you did during the crisis, know that, you know, you're a brand that they want to be associated with and then they want to buy things from. So if people are still going to be spending more time online, which they were anyway, and this has only accelerated that, it's not going to go backwards. So the more research that people do, the more time people have online, this is just going to become more and more important. And that's the same for B2B and B2C. Like whether you're buying data servers or clothes, people just will have more time online to search for you.
Awesome. I guess as well, like our B2B kind of business lives are kind of merging a little bit with our home lives now. We're all working from makeshift offices, so it's kind of inevitable we're going to start seeing the same kind of trends in behavior as well. Great.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to end up sharing the decks after this, and we'll share the recording as well. And then if you've got any more questions, guys, you're more than welcome to fire them over to us. And hopefully someone at Found can either get you an answer or get hold of John to give you the expert Google answer in that case. So next up, we have the lovely James Woolman. So James is one of the data scientists at Found. We'll embarrass him a little bit because James astounds me every day with the knowledge that he brings to our team and the amount of data that he's able to add to our strategies, and also all the long words that he uses. So if you've got any questions or you don't understand what he's talking about, feel free to throw anything in the chat. Hopefully someone will be able to answer as we go, and we'll do questions at the end too. So I'll hand over to you, James.
Thank you. Thanks for that embarrassing intro, but I appreciate it. I was told if people start to understand what I'm talking about, then I no longer have a job as a data scientist, but hopefully I can simplify it down. Can we go to the next slide? Cool. So this is just the run and play. I'm going to be talking about a little, I say little, analysis we did recently around the coronavirus and the impact it's having on lots of different industries. First, I'm just going to talk about me and data science. That's going to take up the majority of the talk. And if I have time, then we'll get to these other points. No, I'm just kidding. After that, we're going to quickly look at assumptions and pitfalls that people make in data. And then we're going to go into the data, and I'm going to show you how we measure the impact it's having on different industries at scale. And then a few like miniature stories that we've seen show themselves through the data as well. And then just a little sneak peek of where we're going with it. Next. Cool. So data science at Found. Usually when I say data science to people or data scientists, I get two reactions. One is, that's a cute little title you've made up for yourself. The other one is, that's really cool. So data science at Found, it's about, firstly, we make tools. So product development is a part of that. One of the things we've made is an anomaly detection system, who we've nicknamed the Anomaly Detective. Is pictured on the right-hand side, made by our designer, Brad. He brought it to life in this mascot that we now use everywhere. We were trying to come up with a name for him, some kind of acronym like because we have anomaly detective. We just need to fit that into some kind of name. So we initially thought maybe CHAD, so CH, anomaly detective, but we didn't know what CH would stand for. But then we also realized, to keep things not so rude, CHAD means something kind of illicit online, so we had to stick a pin in that one. So we're still open to names. But besides making tools that can help the team, we conduct research, which is a bit like what we're talking about here. We test theories as well, so anytime teams have a hunch about something that they want to prove, we can go away, do the analysis and either prove them right or tell them where they're going wrong. And the last thing is, it's all about generating insight, which is what all of the things above should be doing. Anyway, next slide. Cool. Yep. Next slide. Cool. So a lot of what's happened as a result of coronavirus is you get a lot of data scientists weighing in on coronavirus and the situation in their free time, because that's a great way to build up your profile online and get some attention. But the problem with that is you get a lot of data scientists without any kind of inside knowledge or knowledge that you would get from working in the industry or the experience, and then weighing in and drawing false conclusions, which is kind of dangerous. And that's not what we've done here. We're not making conclusions about how coronavirus is spreading or what it means for people. All we're looking at is what the data is going to tell us, rather than going in blind and drawing false conclusions. I just wanted to illustrate that with how we've seen that impact work in digital marketing. So a little while ago, we made a tool. It's a simple tool. You put keywords in and it tells you the search volume for each keyword. So I was working with the SEO team to make a big landscape of a particular industry. What would happen is you'd say, how much search volume does the word dress have? And it would say 2,000 searches. And then we would say, what about dresses? And also say 2,000 searches. And dressing, also 2,000 searches. So if we were to go with that data, we would believe that 6,000 searches a month can come from this portfolio of keywords. But that's actually not true, because what the kicker is that Google groups the similar keywords together. So that whole group of keywords that we just asked for all belong to the same group. And there's only 2,000 searches between them. So we had to develop a way to duplicate them. That's besides the point. But what the point is the fact, without having worked closely with the SEO team, that's knowledge I never would have had. I would have been drawing false conclusions, and we'd be working with data that we just can't rely on. Bringing that back around to the current situation, we see it in the news as well, the exact same thing. So there was an article somebody showed me. It was a BBC article talking about the 5 tests needed in order to lift the lockdown. Oh, cool, I just got a name suggestion for the anomaly detection robot. I will review later on, and I'll get back to you. So test number 2 of 5 was a sustained and consistent fall in the daily death rate. So in the past few weeks, it looked like the number of hospital deaths may have been slowing, but actually another analysis from someone who knew the data a bit better showed that actually that peak had been passed nearly 2 weeks ago, because the government data was showing when deaths were recorded, but not when deaths were actually happening. So there was like a 2-week delay in reality and what the data saw from a blind view. So that's a niche detail in the data set that you only get from from being closely entwined with the data that you're working with. So the false assumption in this case was what date actually meant. Cool. So jumping into the data. So we've looked at 14 countries all around the world. I tried to get a good representation. That covers 274 industries, anything from virtual worlds to water activities. And that's just over 1 million rows of data that we're talking about. Those are the numbers. Next slide. Cool. Getting the data. So we were using the Google Trends API, which is great. It's the only downside is a public API. So when things are very public, they tend to be nailed down quite securely, and they tend to limit how much you can get in a certain amount of time, unless you know what you're doing, in which case you can set up proxy servers around the whole world and then just act like you're different people, which is a totally legit way to do it. I'm not revealing any kind of criminal activity. Besides, the servers are on Google Cloud Platform, so thanks, Google. Yeah, so that's how we got the data. So as I said, we're using Google Trends just to tell you why we chose it. I personally think it's a very powerful tool for storytelling. It allows you to explore how different reactions are having on groups of people and compare different topics. But what's really useful is how they normalize data. So any kind of data you're looking at is always between 0 and 100, 100 being the highest amount of interest ever had over a period of time, and 0 being absolutely no interest. So we're always looking at interest in relation to itself. So what that means is it can show us spikes and dips. So for example here, I got a few animations on this slide, Hannah, just to warn you, there will be a few clicks. So here we're looking at the hotels and accommodations industry in the UK as a general topic. What's clear is we have spikes, so those spikes are the summer tourism. And then another click will reveal the British people visiting their families at Christmas, so less of an interest in hotels, less of an interest in travel. And the next click is something I previously mislabeled as the World Cup, but I'm not a sports person. The World Cup did not happen in 2017. But that summer was a record summer for British tourism, thankfully. And then finally at the end, you see that massive dip. So that's in line with travel restrictions and the lockdown happening in the UK. That should hopefully make sense. Cool. So that's the trends data that we're dealing with. So next I'm going to talk about how we measure that impact it's having. So what's not very clear is there is a very faint pink line behind this graph, which is the graph I just showed. The first thing we always do, and this is very common practice in any kind of analysis for time series, is we take the seasonality out. So we know every year it peaks in the summer, it troughs around Christmas. So we need to remove that from the data. Otherwise, if we're looking at how things should have looked in 2020, we might see a spike, but we need to know that that spike wasn't always going to be there. And that's the reason we deseasonalize it. And just to show you what I mean, if you click, draw out a little, so you can see the repeated pattern that we see every year very consistently. So we programmatically get rid of that. And what we're left with is just raw data and raw trend. So yeah, next, cool. So when we have that data, the question we need to ask is, based on all the historical data that we have, which is about 5 years, what was 2020 supposed to look like? That's a dangerous task to go ahead with because there are so many variables. That's true, but we're just taking a best guess. So maybe we would model future using TensorFlow recurrent neural networks or some deep net. No, okay. We need to use the best tool for the job. And just because it's not a buzzword doesn't mean it's not a legit data science framework. So we decided to keep things quite general and use more simplistic models to avoid any kind of something called overfitting. So when you have a model that's very specific to history, it can kind of freak out when you ask it to predict new data. So we chose a simple model. What we're looking for is a benchmark for the future. So, and this is how we measure the impact it's had. So what we have on the left side of the graph is everything that has happened that we can see. And the dotted line shows where we expect it to be in 2020. So given everything being the same, what should 2020 have looked like, basically? Underneath that, we have the pink line, and the pink line shows what actually happened. And that gap should show us the difference between expectation and reality. And that's what you can, if you want, you can call it the corona effect. We're not saying that that's definitely a causal relationship, but what we can say is that happened, and so did coronavirus. But this is the picture of what happened. Next slide. This is how we then condense that difference into a single number. So when we average that difference, we place a lot more importance on most recent weeks versus weeks that have been long ago, because we've seen, and this is more in line with the reactions we've seen in the media and the gradual restrictions they put in place. It's sort of constant exponential amp up, and that is reflected in how people search and their behaviors. Given all that information, we then get a nice little heat map. I've also seen it called a waffle plot, and that's my preferred name. Essentially, it's a grid. So along the bottom, you have all the countries that we've looked at, and on the left, you've got all the topics. The more green a square is, shows you that that industry in that country is vastly outperforming anywhere we thought it would be. If it's red, that means it's definitely underperforming. So it's done a lot worse than it should have done in terms of the number of people who are interested in it. And if it's white, then that just means it's pretty much unaffected, or it's just fallen in line with where we thought it would be. Cool. And this slide. Okay, it's sticking. This is going to take quite a while. This is a long graph. But essentially, this is what it looks like. We've got all the industries we looked at, all 274 industries in all 14 countries. And you can see all the different greens and red hues, and they show you gradual areas that are doing better or worse than other areas. So we can look at, I'll show you a few more in a bit more detail because this is not readable. Wow, this is going on a lot longer than I thought it would. Okay, cool, we're done. Cool, all right, next slide then. So I'm just going to talk through I got a few examples of interesting things that I think are interesting, insights from the data that we've done, how you can use that information about how search interest has changed and use it for insight and for your business. So the first one is the first and biggest hit in search interest were travelogues and travel guides in South Korea. Might not be that applicable as an insight for most people here, but if one person sees use in it, that's good. Either way, the point of this one is it's the biggest hit that we saw, and it's very reflective of the response that we saw in South Korea. They kind of almost put the world to shame with the incredible speed at which they were able to suppress transmission of the virus. They were very quick to acknowledge the fact that it was coronavirus, and they rolled out really aggressive testing. I mean, I don't think they even needed to shut schools or anything like that, but it just shows how quickly they were able to respond and how good Google Trends is at picking up on people's actual physical behaviors outside of Google. So that's one story. Second one is one of the biggest rises we've seen, one of the biggest rises in interest of virtual worlds in France. Two of them being Habbo Hotel and Second Life, blasts from the past, but apparently they're still hugely popular in France, and even more so now. But virtual worlds has one side, and that's gaming, and then the other side is online virtual classrooms. And that's kind of reflected in how well France have been set up for their virtual classrooms. And they had an e-learning platform that already had like 250,000 students on it by 2017. So again, it shows you, that's not something the data tells us, but the data points us to that direction. It says, hey, something's happening in France. And then it's up to us to add that human layer of insight to go, why is that happening? So, and then we learn things like this. Lastly, we can also look at it from an industry perspective. So here we're looking at shopping industry and all the different subcategories within that. So things like toys, shopping portals and markets and things like that. And it's a really, really mixed bag, which should be quite obvious. So some e-commerce industries are doing quite badly. Things like ticket sales and outdoor markets, which makes sense, except in Mexico where it's apparently thriving, but I don't have any insight into that. Other industries are faring a lot better, things like auction sites, mass merchants, and entertainment is obviously doing very well globally, but that could just be because of Tiger King and not because of coronavirus. But that's where it becomes difficult to draw a causal relationship. But things in the UK that are quite interesting is the rise in interest in the use of search engines, which is really good use for us in digital marketing. People are turning to them a lot more, and well, it's obvious people can't go into stores, so they're shopping online now. But we're seeing that transition rather than just assuming it's happening. Also gift buying, that's also doing quite well in the UK. Okay, next slide, cool. And what's to come? Just to preface that, data can't tell us the whole story. And Google Trends is not always right, and that's only because AI is a bit limited in where it's at currently. So when I was going through this with our marketing director, he turned to me and he said, bath half, James, what is a bath half? How is that home and garden? And it turns out a bath half is a bathroom with only 2 of the 4 main components of a bathroom, but that's not the point. At the time I did this analysis, a bath half, actually it's referring to the bath half marathon and the response to coronavirus in that case. 3 days ago, I searched it again, and actually it does belong in the home and garden category because what you get are images of half baths and shopping for half baths and definitions for half baths. So the search engine changes, but the way we see data aggregated by AI doesn't change as rapidly with it because it doesn't have that human layer of insight. And it's not quite there yet. So it's something that complicated the analysis, but it's also something that is really important to be aware of. So just because data says something doesn't mean we have to trust it completely. And we should always be open to criticizing it and trying to find out why things are. And we're planning to roll this out. As a result, we're planning to go a little bit into more detail. So what we have currently is an overview of a very high level overview of all the different industries we could look at. But all this is really is it points us in a direction to look at. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick the most interesting directions and dive into them in much greater detail to understand what's happening and give a more of a commentary and that human layer of insight that you get, as well as melding it with other data points like social media and other tools that we have available to us. Cool. And the last slide, just some takeaways for you. So don't trust data scientists who wear blindfolds. You know, it's easy to push data through a TensorFlow model and say TensorFlow is amazing, and because I put this data in, but you know what? It's only as good as the data you put into it. We can use predictive modeling to make a powerful model for the future, but we should be careful. It's just the benchmark. Trends in raw data, as we've seen, they can point us in the right direction. They can hone in where we want to apply those insights, but it can start with AI and then tell the humans where to go and intervene. And that's where it becomes really useful, when humans start to take a look at the data and understand what it really means. And on the right-hand side, because apparently my ego is so huge, I've got a more from this author section, which is a couple of blogs that I quite liked, as well as a link to the article around this content as well, if you fancy a read in more detail, or I spoke too quickly through anything. Yeah, thank you, if you have any questions.
So I also, I've also rudely just put your email address on this slide without your permission. So if anyone has questions they want to talk through privately, they can reach out directly to James or spam him. Either way, we've shared it now. So the first question I've got for you, James, actually came from the chat, and that's from Anna, and it's, do you have any data from Greece or the tourism industry particularly?
Yeah, we have data from the tourism industry. Probably not from Greece, but it wouldn't be a lot of effort to get that data and analyze it if you're interested.
Cool. So maybe, Anna, if you drop James an email afterwards, I'm sure he can pull something out for you to have a look at. Cool. And then I have a question about the data sources that you went through. Mm-hmm. Just because you were talking about using Google Trends, and you talked all about why Google Trends is great, but I was wondering if you looked at other data sources and if you dismissed any and why.
Yeah, one of the data sources we looked at was the stock exchanges around the world, which was going quite well. And it's a good way to work out how investors, what they think of the economic viability of different industries. The only problem with that is Google Trends, we can split it by almost 300 different industries. If you try and do that with the stock market, you have some industries that have profiles that are quite rich, and then some industries that don't really match up to the stock market very well. And the other downside is you don't get a view into things like small businesses and startups, because you can only really look at the publicly traded data. So Google Trends, we decided to go with just because of the vastness of the different industries we could look at around the world.
Awesome. And then if you identified some topics that are definitely dropping probably quicker than we expected, so if they're less frequently searched, would you recommend moving the strategy away from them, or trying to capture the limited market share that they're share there is in the market?
Well, I think it would be dangerous to make conclusions that quickly based just on Google Trends. I think you'd have to have more information around exactly the kind of volume you get from a certain industry or a group of keywords, and then make that decision. And then also think about how that's going to change in the future as well. So it might be dropping now, and that should determine your strategy for now, but how's that going to change? And if you do find you should move away from that, the idea of having all the industries and everything together is so you can say, okay, so this part of my industry is not doing well, but maybe we diversify into this row, which is doing quite well, and we can start to make more money that way.
Nice. There's just one more question as well in the chat, which is, do you think we've got enough data now to know about the data from China and how much you would trust that, whether it's been kind of cleaned or censored?
I'm naturally distrustful of data when I see it, and especially if it comes from China, who do censor a lot of data. So no, I don't think it's that trustworthy. But, you know, it's hard to tell because Google's also blocked there.
Nice. And then I think my final question would just be, what would be your #1 tip now for kind of businesses? Ideally, if you can split it into B2B and B2C, that would be awesome, as to how people can be prepping ready for post-COVID-19.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm giving business advice. This is a new one. Okay, here we go. No, I'm just kidding. I would say just keep a really objective eye on what's happening. There's a lot of data out there. And something that was interesting, there was a BBC press conference about data, which I've never seen before. That was the other day. And that's really cool. And there's a bigger emphasis on data now. So I think maybe the trustworthiness in it is starting to grow. But I've gone way off topic. So my tip, just keep an eye out, a really skeptical eye out on the data that you're seeing. Don't immediately trust anything that's put in front of you.